Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring the fascinating mechanics of cognitive therapy, and we're going to see how our minds actively construct our own reality. We often walk through life just kind of assuming that the way we see the world is, well, exactly the way the world actually is. But the source material we're digging into today fundamentally challenges that whole idea. It proposes that psychological distress doesn't just happen to us out of nowhere. It actually arises because of faulty behavior patterns, or, more importantly for our focus today, faulty thought patterns. We're going to look at the literal architecture of our thoughts, break down how they sometimes work against us, and learn how the absolute pioneers of cognitive therapy figured out ways to essentially hack the human mind.
So, do external events cause human misery, or do we do it to ourselves? It's a brilliant question, right? And it sits right at the very heart of our topic today, totally challenging the assumption that our pain is purely the result of things happening outside of our control. Think about it. When something bad happens, say, I don't know, you lose a job or someone is incredibly rude to you, it is just human nature to say that the event itself made you sad or angry. But cognitive therapy suggests a totally different reality. It argues that the event is just raw data. It's what we do with that data, how we process it, that actually creates the misery. And if our distress comes from how we process the world, well, then the key to alleviating that distress lies entirely within our own cognitive framework. Section 1. Albert Ellis and Rational Emotive Therapy. To really understand how this process works, we have to look to Albert Ellis. He basically posited that there's a middleman between the things that happen to us and how we feel about them, and that middleman is our belief system. According to Ellis, when these beliefs are irrational, they severely distort our present reality. He built his famous ABC analysis right around this concept, showing that an initial event doesn't directly cause distress, but instead gets filtered through an irrational belief first. So step 1 is the antecedent event. This is the actual thing that happens in the real world, the trigger. Step 2 is the belief, specifically an irrational belief that dictates how you perceive that antecedent event. And then step 3 is the consequence. This is the negative emotion and psychological distress that follow. So imagine a friend cancels plans. That's the antecedent. If you hold the irrational belief that if people cancel, it means they absolutely hate me, the consequence is going to be deep sadness or anxiety. The event didn't cause the sadness. The belief did. What's absolutely wild here is how these irrational beliefs completely sabotage us by forcing reality into these really strict musts and shoulds that simply do not match up with the real world. These beliefs are rarely, if ever, supported by any empirical evidence in your actual environment. We literally trap ourselves by thinking things must or should be a particular way. Take that first example. One should be loved by everybody all the time. Think about that. If you operate your life on that kind of rigid rule, every single minor criticism is going to feel like a massive, crushing failure. Or how about the second example? Human misery is caused by external events over which one does not have any control. Just holding that belief practically guarantees you're going to feel completely helpless. Section 2. Aaron Beck and Core Schemas. Now, while Ellis gives us a great framework for the present moment, Aaron Beck's cognitive therapy explores where these faulty operating systems actually come from in the first place. He looks at how our history writes the code that governs our present through what he calls core schemas. The crucial point here is that a neglected child doesn't just feel sad in the moment. They might download a core schema that says, I am not wanted. And that schema, it just hides quietly in their mind for years. Think of a core schema like a foundational operating system for your brain. It's constructed from the childhood experiences provided by your family and society. Once it's built, it just rests right under the surface. It becomes the lens through which you view yourself and your own worth, carrying deep-seated beliefs and action patterns with you everywhere you go.
But here's the catch. Later in life, a critical incident, like failing a big exam or facing serious ridicule, acts as a trigger that suddenly reactivates that old childhood schema. Let's trace this path for a second. You have that core schema of I am not wanted, just sitting dormant. Then, during the normal course of life, you encounter a highly stressful situation. The source material gives a really striking example, being publicly ridiculed by a teacher in school. This isn't just an unpleasant afternoon, it's a critical incident. It strikes exactly at the heart of that hidden schema, waking it up and triggering a massive cascade of negative internal reactions. And once triggered, these dysfunctional cognitive structures completely take over, basically warping social reality into a negative, distorted funhouse mirror. Beck identified these as cognitive distortions. They are general ways of thinking, but they have a highly specific effect. They create profound errors of cognition about the social reality around you. You literally stop seeing facts. Instead, every single interaction, every glance, every word spoken to you is twisted to confirm that underlying negative core schema.
And this leads to the ultimate painful result, these persistent negative automatic thoughts that just play on an endless loop in our heads, ultimately leading to deep feelings of anxiety and depression. When that critical incident triggers the core schema and the cognitive distortions take hold, this is exactly what the internal monologue starts to sound like. The source text highlights these exact phrases. Nobody loves me. I am ugly. I am stupid. I will not succeed. They're so persistent, and they're automatic. You don't consciously sit down and choose to think them. They just arrive, totally uninvited, repeatedly bombarding your consciousness and cementing all that psychological distress.
Section 3. The Mind Hack. Refuting Dysfunctional Thoughts.
But here is the truly empowering part of all this. Both Ellis and Beck developed therapeutic methods to hack this entire process and rewrite the code. The situation is definitely not hopeless just because you have irrational beliefs or negative automatic thoughts. Cognitive therapy is an active, structured process designed specifically to identify these faulty patterns and consciously correct them in the present. Through gentle, non-directive questioning, the therapist prompts the client to dispute their own deeply held beliefs. This forces the mind to reconsider its automatic negativity. And notice, this isn't about a therapist forcefully telling a client they're wrong. As the source text explains, in rational emotive therapy, the therapist refutes irrational beliefs through gentle questioning without probing too hard or being overly directive. Similarly, Beck's approach uses a totally non-threatening disputation of the client's beliefs. By asking simple questions like, well, why should everyone love you? The therapist forces the client to think much deeper into their own assumptions. It makes them think in the exact opposite direction of their negative automatic thoughts.
When we compare these two states, the fundamental goal of cognitive therapy becomes crystal clear. On one hand, you have the problem, the irrational belief system full of rigid musts, and the dysfunctional schemas leading straight to cognitive errors. On the other hand, you have the solution. As the client answers these gentle but probing questions, they actually make a profound change in their philosophy about life. They gain real insight into the nature of their dysfunctional schemas. By continuously challenging these thoughts, the client transitions away from an irrational system and into one of rational cognitive insight, alleviating that heavy psychological distress. The rational belief system literally replaces the irrational one. The absolute biggest takeaway for us today is that therapy isn't just about fixing symptoms. It's about taking back control of the narrative your brain is writing every single day. Whether you're using Ellis's ABC analysis to catch an irrational belief in the moment, or Beck's method to untangle a core schema triggered by a critical incident, you are actively learning how your own mind works. You are building emotional insight. You learn that sure, while you can't control every single antecedent event or critical incident that life throws your way, you have absolute power over the belief systems and schemas that process those events. So leaving you with that thought, I highly encourage you to examine the automatic voices in your own head and see what you can rewire next. Listen really closely to your own internal monologue the next time you feel stressed or upset. Are you enforcing rigid shoulds on yourself or on other people? Is an old core schema trying to distort your present reality? Just remember, the mind is malleable. By simply asking the right questions, you have the profound power to change your cognitive structures and fundamentally improve how you experience the world. So what are you going to gently question today?